Hey YouTube, how you guys doing tonight? Kevin here coming at you with another video. So this is the top end to Dave's TS125. So we have some cleaning we have to do on this, and we're not putting this on tonight. We are going to put this on tomorrow. I'm hoping to get this engine up and running before the weekend. That's my goal, or at least during the weekend. I want to have it for a start on this bike. So let's get you guys in the stand. We will get crack-a-lacking. But before I do, please take a moment and hit that subscribe button and the bell icon. And please don't forget to give a thumbs up. Alright guys, let's get you guys in the stand and let's get crack-a-lacking. Alright, so this is the bottom part of the cylinder. Here are the reeds. This bike is in amazing condition with stupid low mileage. Okay? In fact, this engine is so low mileage, it still has the cross hatch pattern. Now, if you can see that, let me see if I can find a flashlight here real quick. Where did I put that? There it is, right here. Okay. I don't know if you can see this or not, but the cylinder still has the cross hatch pattern. It has been sitting, so it's got a little bit of a ring, but it's not no grooves. There is no scoring on the cylinder. The cylinder is completely blemish free. So what do we do with a cylinder like this? Well, we're not going to hone it. Okay, we are not going to hone it. I'm going to show you another trick that I do with these, and it's just to take off the crap. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is inspect the cylinder as we just did, which is basically a visual eye inspection. Okay, I can tell from looking at the cylinder is in perfect condition. So what we're going to do, using some WD-40, I'm going to just let the whole thing down. Okay, so the whole cylinder is wet. I'm going to be using wet dry 3000 grit sandpaper. This stuff is like wicked fine. Okay, I'm just going to fold it a couple times. I am not taking any material off. This right here is just going to take off any blemishes that are on there. Do a few times that way. I am literally not taking off anything but grime. That's it. Okay? I'm not this is not honing. This is lighter than honing. It's really just to clean it up. And you want to do it evenly. You don't want to be, not that it's going to take off any material, because, I mean, look, it's not even gray. Okay? Alright, now what we're going to do is I'm going to get a rag, and I'm going to wipe that out real quick. We'll take a look, and we'll see if we can see anything. Like I said, this right here is just taking off the crap. If it's been sitting, you can do this on a freshly honed cylinder. It's not going to hurt anything. Okay. This cylinder is beautiful. Feels excellent. Okay. You can see light scratches, but that's because it had a lean condition. Okay. This cylinder does not have, there is a one right there. See the one going down the cylinder right here? If you look right here going down the cylinder, it's just a light scratch. It is nothing. You can't even put your fingernail in it. Okay, here you are. You can't even put your fingernail. So smooth, okay? It literally just made a little bit of a mark. No groove, nothing. Now, we see that, which wasn't there a few minutes ago before I did that. Now we're going to take a look at the piston. And we see the skirt here, and we flip it around, and there is the correspondent scratch. Once again, it's not really anything there. You can't put your fingernail in it. I can hear it right there. Yeah, nothing. Alright, so let's take a look at that. 30-40, 3000 grit. Look at this, guys. Look at this. This is crazy. This bike is in such nice shape. Okay, see? Some of it's gone away. It's just that simple. When you have stuff like that that's light scratches, this right here was from the lean condition. It's on the exhaust side. Excess carbon, the rings were stuck. This thing is in nice shape. Alright, now typically if we let this thing run longer in that lean condition where it was speeding way up, that's where it would cut the line. That's where it would cut the groove into the cylinder. There is nothing to even protrude or to even worry about. I mentioned this in an earlier video. Typically, what you would do if you had a deep groove, this is cast iron, you could literally hone that out, but here is why I'm not going to hone this out. Okay? Because that right there is not enough to write home about. This is so fine of a groove where you can't even feel it. Literally, nothing is going to happen. If I hone this out, I'm going to be taking material off just to get rid of one tiny little scratch. And it's not, it's a blemish. It's not even, how would I put it? It's only there because of a lean condition. It's not a groove. It's not protruding. It is no, you can't even catch your fingernail in it, okay? It literally is a mark, and it's a mark because of this on the piston, which is also the same, okay? Now, when you have something like this, that's acceptable. I know it sounds crazy, but that's acceptable. When you have grooves and scratches that are like you can catch your fingernail in, okay, that is bad. So this cylinder is actually in excellent condition, and later on when he does do a full engine rebuild, which this bike, he's going to have years before that happens, okay, then at that point he can go ahead and bore this thing out or put a heavy hone on it. But there is no point in honing this. Okay, so I wanted to show you guys that. A lot of people see a little scratch like that and they freak out and they go, oh my god, my cylinder is junk. The cylinder is not junk. However, you do need to find out what the problem was before that happens. Now, if you look back, I did a video on leak detection. You know, I sprayed the top around the gasket with some carburetor cleaner when the engine was running, the base, the intakes, and all that. Now, that's how we determined that it was the crank bearing, the crank seals. Okay, because we sprayed it around all the points where air can get into the engine, and nothing happened. Motor always ran great and had excellent compression. So it literally just started, like just. So let's start cleaning this thing up. Check it for flatness across the top, which is kind of a pain in the neck because you get the studs, and we're not removing the studs, and we show you guys how to do that. So let me get the wire brush, the wire wheel, and get this all cleaned up. So before I start cleaning up that, I'm actually working on the piston right now, trying to get off the carbon, the varnish. I took both of the rings off the top, and all I'm doing is using a rag and the 3000 grit. And it's a wet dry. I'm not using water, I'm using WD-40, and it's actually working quite well. But you're going to have to use some elbow grease because this stuff is in there really, really good. Now what happens is carbon builds up. It builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up. And then what happens is it sticks to rings. It has blow-by. So now what blow-by is, I'll tell you what blow-by is. When the spark ignites the fuel on top of the cylinder, the blow-by actually blows by the rings and into the crankcase. And that contaminates your next fuel charge and causes you to lose power. So you want to make sure that when you're doing these pistons, you're using a low ash oil and you're using a high octane fuel. Now, carbon buildup is from a bunch of things. One, not allowing the bike to get up to temperature. Two, idling these bikes for long periods of time. A lot of people take the bikes out and they idle them and idle them and idle them and idle them, and they build, oh, I want to show off my bike and I'm going to show you how it runs and all that other stuff, and then it builds up a lot of carbon because the bike's not actually running. two-stroke engines need to run. They have to spin up at the high speeds, and they need to have the air flowing through these cooling fins for proper cooling. So that's what causes all this buildup of carbon. And as it builds up, it really makes a mess. And I find that the 3000 grit sandpaper really does a number on it. But it's, you know, you wish it was a heavier grade, like a, you know, like a 50 or 1500, but you don't want to use anything more than the 3000 because you don't want to take any of the metal off, you know. You don't want to ruin the piston. See the scratch right there? Barely. So it's getting there. So the piston's being decarbonized right now is what I'm doing. My point of action here. But you can see how nice this piston looks. One little blemish right there and it's not even bad. So this piston does not need to be replaced, but it does need to be significantly cleaned up. You can see how thick. See, I can catch my fingernail on that carbon. That's how much carbon is built up on the sides of this piston. And I still have to do inside the grooves. So I'm going to get back on this and I'll be right back. Okay, so using the 3000 grit sandpaper, you can see how nice and clean the skirts look. No carbon on the top. I use this right here in the wire brush. And then on this side right here, this is the side right here that had the scratch in it. Yeah, you very faintly see it right there. But I mean, it's so smooth, you're not even going to catch on it. So this piston right here is a good piston. Now what I have to do is I have to clean up inside the groove. Now to do that, I'm going to show you guys typically what you would do, because I'm going to reuse the rings that were on here because they're perfect. The bike had great compression and there was no issues with any of that. So we're going to reuse the rings. However, I got to get that carbon. See how it's black in there? We got to get that out of there. So a couple of things that I do is I let it sit for a little while in fingernail polish remover. Yeah, you heard it. Fingernail polish remover. And I'll get like a little cup. I'll dump it in there. Like this right here, just a little metal cup. I'll put this in here like so. Oh, and remember how I told you that the blow-by going past the ring contaminates the fuel in the crankcase. See how it's black up inside there? That is, what do you call it there? That blackness, that carbon, that's because the blow-by was contaminating the fuel down below the crank. So how this works on a two-stroke engine, when the fuel and air enter the cylinder through the intake, right here through the reeds, as the piston travels upwards, it creates a suction. And when the piston moves up, these reed valves open up and the air and fuel from the carburetor goes through the reeds and into the crankcase as the piston's moving up. Then, when the piston comes down, these close under pressure, so the pressure builds up in there, closes off the reeds. The fuel and air that's inside the crankcase where the crankshaft is gets pushed from the piston going down, pushes the fuel and air up these transfer ports and through the holes in the side of the cylinder. Hold on one second, I want it to fall over. On top of the piston for combustion. That's how the fuel and air get from the top to the bottom. Now, what happens when your rings are sticking and you have a lean condition? Now, when the spark ignites that fuel that was on top, it actually blows by the cylinder. So some goes out the exhaust port, and then the rest of it goes down past the cylinder and gets contaminated with the fuel and air. What does that mean? What does that do? When you have hot gases going into your crankcase, that can damage things like the crank seal. That can cause excess heat down below. That can ruin crank bearings. That can do a lot of damage. So it's very important to make sure that you have a nice clean piston that does not get carboned up. Kevin, how do I tell if my piston and my rings are getting carboned up? I'll show you guys a little trick on 2 strokes. See this port right here, your exhaust port? I'm going to slide the piston. I'm just going to randomly slide. There's no rings on it. Okay, so if you take your exhaust off, you can actually see the piston. Let me blow you. And just dropped it. Luckily for a rubber mat. Okay, all right. So let me blow you guys up here. Show you this. Okay. Always, by the way, always keep a rubber mat down below whenever you work in case you drop something like this, like I just did. Okay, so the piston comes up inside here, and now you can see where the rings are. See the rings? There's no rings on, but there's those carbon for this part of the video is actually helping out because it makes it look like there's rings in there. But you can actually see if there was carbon on the piston skirts and the rings when the piston goes all the way up to the top of that center. Look how much you can see of that. See? You can see quite a bit of the piston. And this is a perfectly good way to tell if you are if you're carboned up or not. Okay? By removing your exhaust. This makes it a lot easier so you don't have to tear apart the whole top end of the motor, because at the top of the engine you're only going to see the crown. You're not going to see the skirts. So there you go. That's one way to tell. What do you call it there? Alright, so I just don't want to lose my place. Alright, so you can use the exhaust port to do your cylinder inspection. Now I know what I was going to tell you. There's also to tell if your rings are sticking when the piston, let's put this back through here. When the piston is right about there, you can use a flathead screwdriver. Show you this trick. You take a flathead screwdriver, make sure it's clean, so wipe it on a rag first. You can reach up inside here and just grab the rings and push them in and out a little bit. See if they move. If they move, that means they're not stuck. So if you have an engine that has low compression, what you would do is you would take off your exhaust. You'd reach up inside here and you just kind of push on the rings a little bit and see if they move in and out. Do not scratch the rings. Do not jab at them. Just put it right on the ring groove and push it in, and see if they move. If they don't move, that's it. Then you have a problem. If they do move, you can move on. There might be something else somewhere else. Another problem somewhere else is what I meant to say. So that is how you clean up a piston. This piston is perfectly good to use, so we are going to use it. And, oh yeah, now I know. I'm losing my spot here, guys. I'm sorry. I do apologize. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be cleaning up the piston. So I'm going to use some, you can use alcohol too, but I like the fingernail polish remover. You're dissolving carbon. You can use carburetor cleaner if you want, but you put that in like that, just let it soak. This stuff is reusable. This is the one that I bought for the shop here. Don't have to let it soak too long. Alright, so now while that's doing that, I'm going to show you guys what I use to clean out carbon. Yes, an old copper head gasket. I keep a bunch of them. Show you guys quick. I keep all my old head gaskets because these things come in handy. These are good gasket scrapers. Actually, probably the best gasket scraper you can possibly get. Alright, and then you can just pick one out. I like to use a thick one on rings. And then what I do is I clean them up. Yes, I'm cleaning up a blown head gasket. Go figure, right? The reason why is I don't want no sand, I don't want no carbon, I don't want any of that crap on there. Okay, then I'm going to grab a pair of cutters. Look at this. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm right in the way. Got my cutters. Cut a ring there. There. Cut the head gasket in half. I cut it at an angle so it will be more of a pick. Okay? When you're doing this, these become sharp edges, so you have to be careful. Now let's sit in there for a few more minutes. Alright. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring this over. Let me just put this right in the groove. Let's see how much I can get out of it. Now you can use a broken piston ring if you're going to replace the rings, but the rings on this thing, like I said, everything's perfect. You can literally see the carbon coming out. Look how much carbon's coming out of this thing. Okay, and obviously be careful when you come up to your pin. You're going to want to clean both sides of that. But watch this. Voila, look how nice that top groove looks compared to the bottom. Copper head gaskets. Who knew, guys? Who knew, right? So these are what I use. Like I said, I enjoy the copper head gaskets. I try to cut them at an angle because they come in handy for the picking. But you can see how nice and how it just loosens it right up. See, I'm right at the pin. But just going to clean it all the way up, all the way around. And that's all that carbon is causing these rings to stick. This could be due to a clogged exhaust baffle, incorrectly adjusted carburetor, low octane fuel. A lot of things can happen to this. Yeah, look at that, huh? Oh, listen to that. Just cutting right through it. I can't imagine how nice this engine is going to run when it's all done. Not going to lie, I thought it ran pretty good before. I'm going to continue with this, guys. I'm not going to bore you with keep doing that in front of you, but you guys get the idea. See how nice and clean it looks? I'll show you guys the end result. Okay. And now you can see how nice the ringlands look. Everything is nice and clean. Piston looks good. And that's it. And there's your line for your exhaust. So that, my friends, is a clean piston RTG ready to go. What do I do with the old stuff? Now I know it looks like it's contaminated, which kind of is. But I'll show you what I do with it because you don't need to throw that out. I use this right here for literally cleaning. I don't use it for obviously doing my nails. You know, I use it for cleaning pistons and everything else. You know, certain things that are less, what do you call it there? That is not so much needed for carburetor cleaning. When carburetor cleaning would be too abrasive. So I just grab a funnel, I put it back in there, and dump it back in. You can filter it if you want, but I'm not going to. Because I really don't care if the carbon gets in there. It's just a cleaner. It's cheap, and you can save it and reuse it. Where a carburetor cleaner, once you spray it, that's it, it's gone. And kind of a waste of money. Now, I wouldn't use that to clean, well, certain carburetors, I guess I could use that, but I'll show you guys more about this later on. It's got a lot of good, it's more like an acetone type thing, you know. So, a little less abrasive. You can still see a lot of crap at the bottom there. Alright, let's move on from that. Piston looks good. We're good on the piston. Now we got to take off this gasket stuff here. This gasket material. See the way I just cut right into that? Yeah, watch. Gasket material, just cut right into it. Stuff comes in handy. Especially when you get some of this stuff right here. This right here is not going to mar it up, you know. I should grab a nicer, a better head gasket, yeah. Okay. I like the ones that you can't cut yourself on, you know. I try to use this right here as much as possible. If it's really on here like this, then you have to use like a real scraper. But I try to do with this first. Get through it. I just don't want to cut the casing. This stuff right here is actually probably glued down, so we'll try a blade on that one. I don't like using blades on the Kawasaki's because of the gasket material. Head gasket stuff works the best. We're replacing all the gaskets, so we're taking this off too. Kind of hard to get underneath. You don't want to pry here because if this thing doesn't move, you can actually break your cylinder. So you gotta be careful doing that. I need to get a small screwdriver. Okay. Something to get that gasket out of there and get underneath of it. Which these are a pain in the neck because they are fragile, so you got to be careful. But I think we're just going to continue scraping the gasket around it and we'll get it as it comes out. Everything's just glued down. I'm going to scrape this, I'll be back. Alright, cleaned up a lot of it. Just get up underneath there. The gasket. Okay. Material's like stuck. This gasket is awful. I mean, that is some seriously stuck gasket. Oh, you can smell the old bad fuel. Smell that? Ugh. Take a whiff. Right there. That's gasoline that's gotten into this area right here. It's terrible. That's gasoline. That's old gas that was trapped in between the gasket and the reed valves. Ugh. Terrible. Terrible. Okay. Can't even get it off with this. And these copper gaskets typically take it all off. I mean, no problem. That is just some really caked on, absolutely crap. Let me hit that with the brass brush and see if that... Okay, so I got the gasket surface nice and clean. As you can see, that was a little bit of a nightmare. But I got that in there. So when I'm looking at this cylinder right here, the bottom end right here, these are where your transfer ports are. These are where your reeds are. So basically how this works is your carburetor is sitting here. This is up like this. Carburetor is just supplying fuel and air through here. They come through this port right here, which is your reed valves. Right here. And they are literally like reeds like you'd have on a musical instrument. So when the piston goes forward, it actually pulls these reed valves open. You see one right there. It'll pull it open. It'll pull both of them open. The suction will pull them open and pull the air and fuel up through them. Then, when the piston comes down, the pressure is negative, so positive pushes on them and basically forces all the fuel and air that's in that crankcase to move up these transfer ports. It doesn't have an option. That's where it's got to go. Now, as I showed you earlier, at the bottom side of that piston, it was getting blow-by. And a sign of blow-by is a lot of that carbon that's up inside there. So what I have to do now is I have to clean out all that carbon, because this carbon right here is going to go, it's going to burn, it's going to get into the exhaust system, it's going to create sludge, it's going to be a lot of smoke. So I have to go get some carburetor cleaner tomorrow, brake clean, and clean that all out. You can use carburetor clean or brake clean, but you want to flush this out. So what I'm going to continuously do is I'm going to continue to clean up all my gasket surfaces and make sure that everything is seated properly. You want to clean up the flange mount, and you want to get all the carbon and all the sooty stuff out of the exhaust where it comes out, because if you don't, the exhaust gasket is not going to seat in here properly, and then it's going to create a leak, and then you're going to end up going, Kevin, I wish I listened to you. I picked up these different wire brushes at Harbor Freight. This is a brass one, both of these brass, and when you put them on there, you can see how nice they look. That'll seat just fine. It's nice when you can use shortcuts like that to clean them up. Okay, so here we have a straight edge. You want to make sure you're using a straight edge after you clean your gasket surface. And you set that on there. You try to put this underneath. See if you can get it to go under. Nope. So I go back to back on these. I'm using the smallest one I could find first to start from there. If this thing was warped, like up in here, this here would be up like this, and then I'd be able to put this underneath of it, and then would basically say this cylinder is warped. But so far, it's looking really, really good. And you can see the fire ring where it sits, so you want to make sure that that's where you're checking. This thing is perfectly straight. Check a couple times. This is good. Alright, so we have a nice flat cylinder. We know we're good here. We cleaned up this gasket surface here. We have to flush it out and soak it. This cylinder is in good shape. The exhaust flange is cleaned up. This part right here we don't have to check, because the way the gas, I could tell by the gasket it wasn't blown out or anything like that. And then the other thing we have is the intake gasket. Now you might notice how I didn't pull that off, and that's because it didn't want to come off too freely. This is plastic and they do break. So if they don't come off willingly, I mean, I could pry it off, but I did check it before and it's not leaking. So we are going to not disturb that plastic intake, but we will clean it. Because if I do that, I take a chance of breaking it, snapping it, or doing something of the sort, and I can't even wiggle it side to side. So that gasket right there is glued in and it's perfectly fine. So I'm not even going to bother with it. So next step with this is to flush it and clean it and get all the as much of that carbon out as possible. And then we're going to do the same thing. When we do that, we're going to flush out the bottom side here. So we'll probably use some gasoline, let it sit in there for a little bit, put this whole thing right into a bucket of gasoline and see what it does. Let it break up the what do you call it there, the carbon that's in there, because I mean it's just really, really thick. So I got a bucket, I'll put this in and let it soak, and then we'll clean it all out, flush it out after, because you can't leave it with that carbon in there. It's gonna ruin it could ruin it, you know what I mean? So anyway guys, I'm gonna go take a break and I will be back later on. Okay, I am back, well rested. Alright, so where we left off with this is we cleaned up all the gasket surfaces. We cleaned up the intake, we cleaned up the cylinder, we checked it all out, checked the top of flatness and all that, but there's a lot of carbon buildup inside this. So we are going to get the carbon out, or break it up anyway, degrease it, and I'm going to show you guys how I do that. There are several methods for degreasing a carboned up cylinder. when I say carboned up, I mean in the transfer ports. You can see how bad it is. They're pretty well carboned up. So there's a couple ways you can do it, and I'll show you guys. There's, well, you can use degreaser right here, which is what I'm going to spray in there and let this thing sit overnight with that in it. Whoop, just lost that cap. And, or you can let it sit in gasoline. So I got a metal container here that's just big enough, it looks like, for the cylinder to fit into, like that. I'm going to shake up my can really well. Okay, and then I'm going to spray that in there. Make sure I get that in all the ports. So get that all in there good, guys. It's like coming out black already. It's awful. And then I'm going to let that sit. The other thing you can do is you can pour gasoline in there and let that break it up as well, where it's not really grease, it's more of a carbon. This stuff actually does work pretty good. Watch this. Here's my finger is clean. Watch this. You can see the black on it. So it's got some potential to clean. I am actually going to fill this up with gasoline and let the gasoline break up the carbon. It will really loosen it. And then when I take it out and dry it off, I'm going to hit it with this again and then use a garden hose and then blow it off so it doesn't flash rust. So let me get some gasoline. We're going to throw that in there. And also too, guys, if you're going to do this method with the gasoline, remember, it's very, very dangerous, and do not do this or leave it inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put this into a bucket over it, so no animals or anything can get into it, with a brick on top. And this will be underneath the bucket filled with gasoline. And then the gasoline will go into my cleaner mix. So never dump, I have to say this, never dump waste gas on the ground. Try to save it and recycle it properly. There is redemption centers in most towns that will take it. You can call your local town and they can also tell you where to dispose of it. Okay, so with that said, I got some old gas that's big, that's good enough to break this up, and I'm going to throw in what I got. If I can get it open. My God, it's tight. Okay. This gas has been sitting for about 4 months. So we will dump this in here. I'm going to actually do this outside, so it's going to be off camera, but you guys get the idea. I'm going to dump this in. Okay, so now the gasoline is in there. You can already see how it's turned black already, and that's because it's breaking up the carbon. And you can see, watch this. See that? It's going to break it up, and then it comes off. It comes off pretty easy after that. So we're washing this in gasoline. I'm going to go get this out of here because I don't want to leave it in there overnight inside the shed, where we keep all of our specialty stuff. So you can see how it's filled up inside the transfer ports, and when I put it like this, it's literally halfway. So tomorrow I'll flip it over and decarbonize the other side of that. But that's how I decarbonize them, and this actually cleans them up pretty well. You're going to be really surprised of how nice this is going to clean them. This is going to clean everything. When you put it in like this, it's up over the transfer ports. But if you put it in this way, and this is what I wanted to show you, you're actually putting air pockets. So this is only going to clean the bottom of them. So the first time you do it, you want to have them this way so that it actually fills up at the edge of the ports and there's no air bubbles in there. Okay, so that's what I got for you guys for now. I want to say thank you for watching, thank you for subscribing, and then tomorrow we'll get this thing all put, this top end put back onto the bike. So that's my plan for this. All right, guys, I will talk to you later. I'm out.